What's up guys and welcome back. So you've decided to buy your first digital SLR camera. When you look at these things, they can look pretty confusing. I'm going to go over all the core functions of a camera today and explain to you exactly how they work. And I think it's going to be a little bit easier to understand than you think. Stick around. All right, so how does your camera work? Because that's basically what I'm going to be telling you today, exactly how every single camera works. There's three core settings, and those settings that you can manipulate via the body of your camera or an app on your phone, etc., is ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. To understand all three of these, you have to understand exactly what a camera is doing. Inside of every camera is a thing called a sensor. And like every other type of sensor, the sensor inside of a camera collects data. The data that it collects is light. The more light that reaches the sensor, the more bright the picture is, so on and so forth. And in some cases, the more light that enters the camera and hits the sensor, the more detail is in the picture. Which brings me to the first of our settings, and that is aperture. Aperture is an odd word, but in short, what it means is basically the diameter of a cylindrical object. The cylindrical object being a lens. As you can see, it is a tube. We can kind of correlate it with a water hose. It's funny, but a water hose allows water to go through it. And there's going to be way more water going through a fire hose as opposed to a garden hose. So these numbers that go from a range of some lenses are f1.2 or even f1. This particular lens is f2.8 and it goes all the way up to an f22. Those numbers basically mean how much light the lens is allowing through to the sensor. And in the case of a hose or a fire hose, as if it's a bigger hose, more water is going to be able to flow through it. So think about it like that. And so using the numbers, it's actually a little bit backwards is what it should be. And that is the lower the number, actually the wider the aperture is. So the more light that can go in to the camera. So if you're using a lens that's f3.5 is the lowest number it goes to, that means that is the widest the lens can be open to allow light to go through. So the next setting is shutter speed. And I can use the hose again. At the end of every hose is some kind of spigot or spout that turns it on and off. Inside of a camera, there's a curtain. And that shutter release button, or the button you push on your cell phone, is telling the camera to release that shutter. So that shutter opens and closes, allowing light to hit the sensor. So now that you understand aperture, the shutter speed basically allows whatever light the lens is allowing into, right in front of the shutter, allows it to pass for a certain amount of time. So what that means is that the shutter, if it's open for a long time, the more light that is going to hit the sensor. So the lower the shutter speed, the more the light. The higher the shutter speed, the less the light. Now, in real world terms, if you're shooting something that's moving quickly, you want that to be like a blink of an eye. I would never shoot anything moving less than maybe 1/100th or 1/150th of a second. You get in there lower, you're going to start seeing shake. Somebody's going to move their hands like this and you're just going to come out blurry. But the main thing to remember is that a shutter speed is basically how long the sensor is exposed to the light via the curtain inside the camera. Now we'll talk about ISO. ISO performance is something that you buy in high-end cameras. The camera that I'm filming with is a 5D Mark IV and it has extremely good ISO performance. What ISO is basically changing the sensitivity of the sensor itself. And ISO should never be changed before aperture or shutter speed. When you get good with a camera, you'll understand that ISO really brings in grain to your photos. Because if you think about a person that's, maybe you're riding the bus or something and there's a guy who's on the bus with you and he's just edgy and stuff like that, like he's super sensitive. He's more prone to react to whatever. A sensitive sensor is going to create more noise and more just grain inside the photo. So keeping as low of ISO as possible is very important when taking a photo. Only in low light situations should you raise that ISO up. But you know, it's not to say that you can't raise your ISO up. Obviously you should in some situations, but that is the last thing that you should raise in most situations other than some astrophotography, etc. All right, so to wrap this up, I hope that makes sense to you guys. The basic function of a camera is to collect light. Photography and video is basically using light to create images. You know, there's so many ways to manipulate light, or you know, using reflectors, using flashes, using just all kinds of stuff that you can do to manipulate light. But the camera itself is the first thing that you should learn. And I hope this video helped out. In the future, I'm going to be doing videos where I take you out into real world scenarios and talk about the settings that I'm using and why. And so please hit the subscribe button, and I hope this helped.